point that direction, Abraham builds an altar. You point that direction, Joshua builds an altar. The continuity and the connection is incredible.
Every part of this land is part of me.
If one has a vision, he will not perish. This is the call of Israel.
Throughout the Bible, countless characters build altars to God. One of them is the father of the Jewish nation, Abraham, the first to solidify and personify the relationship between God and the Jewish people and this land. He builds 4 altars that are uniquely represented in his life story that we're going to talk about today. Each one of them represents a different aspect of his life, God's promise to the people, and God's promise for this land. And there's something unique about Abraham's altars that thousands of years later, we still can look at them and the lessons learned from them, the message spoken through them, and understand that they remain relevant to our lives today.
All this neighborhood wasn't here 4 years ago.
This is the heart. From that, everything develops. This is the place where everything started.
This is the place he chose. Think of it as the intersection between God and man. This is that crossroads known as Israel today. The heartland of Israel is where the altars will be built.
We're heading into the heart of Jerusalem to meet my good friend Hanna Ben Haim, who's going to help us unpack the story of Abraham and his 4 altars. And we're going to do that at the site of one of those altars overlooking Mount Moriah.
Altars are the heartland of Israel. This is basically the whole land an altar to God. And it's on this backbone of Israel, this central line. We see Samaria and Judea with Jerusalem right in the middle. We don't really know exactly what Abraham's altars looked like, but it is through this man, his seed is more numerous than the seashores, more than the stars you can count. And it's all because of one thing. He lived by faith. So we all have altars in our lives. We all have moments of walking with God where he's going to call us into a place. Now, jump off the high dive. I'm there to catch you. Abraham was willing to jump off the high dive.
Hanna broke down Abraham's altars one by one to paint a picture of how they help us understand faith, sacrifice, and the land of Israel.
So we start with Abraham at Alon Moreh. God caused him to leave his home, and he travels on this road like a pilgrim.
Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh. There the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him.
And what was it that he saw? Someone who promises him and his seed the land. And his response to the Lord appearing to him is to build an altar. And that's the first altar we hear of that Abraham built.
From there he went on towards the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord.
So, Beit El, he builds another altar, and he now has this intimate relationship where he calls on the name of the Lord. He knows his name. God says to him, do you see this land? You go to the north, you go to the south, you go to the east, to the west. It's yours and your descendants forever.
So Abraham went to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he pitched his tents. There he built an altar to the Lord.
Hebron. What does that root word come from? It comes from the place of the friend. Friendship. So this is Abraham building an altar to his friend. He is the one who is referenced in the Old Testament and the New Testament, the only one, as a friend of God.
Abraham built an altar there. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar.
Take now your son, your only son, whom you love, and take him to the land of Moriah.
Right here.
Right here. And offer him up on a altar as a sacrifice. And this is the ultimate test. Abraham, who do you love more? Am I still number one? And we know that Abraham passes that test, doesn't he? And you know, there are very few places in the Bible where God is screaming. And in this instance, in Genesis 22, when it says, Abraham, Abraham, don't do it. Now I know you fear God, because you have not withheld even your only son from me.
It's incredible how you look at that from a bird's eye view and the story just comes to life, where God says, I want this to be the point where you know you're going to keep coming back to. Almost 4,000 years since the first time, and every time you come back to these places of worship, the covenant expands.
Well, there's the key there. It's worship.
Yeah.
Our return to the land is a form of worship.
Welcome back to our studio here in Jerusalem. It's beautiful to see, Mati, how God keeps his covenants with the people of Israel. And when we look on covenants in the Bible, we see some conditional covenant and some non-conditional covenant.
Yeah.
The first covenant that God made with Abraham was a non-conditional covenant. And we're here because of that covenant.
Yeah, and what I think people often miss is that entering into that kind of covenant, getting that promise, is usually not easy. Just like Joshua, the pioneers of today have to be brave, bold, and sacrificial in their life.
And full of faith.
Let's dive deeper into this story of the people living these four altars.
Let's watch together the four altars.
So there you have it. 4 altars that are spread throughout Israel. And some of them are located in highly contested areas. In Judea and Samaria, known by some as the settlements. What's interesting is just like back then, still today, the people who live in those communities, who live in the place of those altars, have to bear the price of that sacrifice to live in the promised land. The same thing that applied to the time of Abraham applies still today. We're traveling into the heartland of Israel, into Judea and Samaria. We're about to meet with Yair Almakyas, who's one of the founders of a community called Havat Gilad, or Gilad's Farm in English, a young and small community in the heartland of Samaria. Hey, Yair.
Hi, Mati.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see
Beautiful,
you.
beautiful place. So we're standing here in a community that you helped found. Do you feel like you're living something that's historically unique?
A lot of times when you sit quiet in evenings and you look at the lands that Abraham, the first altar that he built was in Nablus.
This is really that place. It's all here around us. Building a settlement from scratch takes a lot of commitment, but the people of Havat Gilad are willing to put even their most basic comforts on the altar to make this a reality. About 12 years ago, you and your family and 3 other families come to this place. There's nothing here.
You need to understand, too, when we came here, there was no electricity, no water.
Challenging life.
Challenging life. We started to plant trees, to bring water tank, to bring the electricity, cables, and all the things that you can imagine when you build up a place. Every part of this land is part of me.
I think we need to give some historical context to how you reached that point in time where you're standing here in Havat Gilad in Samaria. Like, what happened historically that this place can exist?
1967. The 6 Days War, we liberate this part of the land from Jordan, going back to the lands of our fathers. In 1977, they start to build out settlements in Judea and Samaria.
Since people began building settlements in this area, this has been a challenging subject for the Israeli government. It draws a lot of criticism from the international community and remains one of the major stumbling blocks in the peace process with the Palestinians. Depending on who's in power, the government will either support or stand against what people like Yair are doing.
It's not only a place to live or a place to raise the kids, it's politically charged. As you see, it's a very nice place. We have roads. There were no roads when we get here.
Now, 12 years later, it's this very thriving and quickly growing community. Someone who comes to a community that has nothing, 4 trailers on a hilltop, you have to have a specific mindset to do something like that. It's amazing to see the level of commitment the residents of Havat Gilad have for their vision. The first people that came here to this community, not only did they not even have a house, they lived in a bus.
Yeah, they lived in a bus.
So this is a whole new level of humble beginnings.
There are people that live in a tent in the beginning.
So this was your first house in the community?
This small house, we raised 4 kids in this
tiny home.
We want to fully live inside this unique place. And part of fully live is also being part of the land. to grow agriculture, to grow goats, to grow trees.
From the Bible and the theology all the way back to the goats on the ground.
Yeah.
Now everywhere we look, you have nice homes, kindergarten, infrastructure. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, this is our purpose.
Now it was time to meet with Yael Shevach, another one of Havat Gilad's early pioneers. Her late husband, the Rabbi Yael Shevach, is a legendary part of Havat Gilad's story. He was influential both in life and in death. So Yael, we're sitting here on your deck here in Havat Gilad. But we want to start with sort of the story of origin. So it's 2010 or 2011. There's yet again an operation in the Gaza Strip. Rockets are flying. You live in Sderot, which is on the border, and you decide to move to a safer part of the country and end up here in Havat Gilad, which at the time was a very young community.
Very young. It was a 25 family.
Your husband becomes like the religious authority in the community?
Yeah, like the rabbi here. He started to teach Torah, and it was the must thing he wanted to do to show everyone that the Torah is very sweet. And one time when he was supposed to have a Torah lesson here at 8 o'clock, and he didn't come back. So I called him. Very quickly, he answered me and told me I was shot. I am injured in the road next to Havat Gilad. My children was at their bed, but they understood something happened, and they get back from the bed and come to me. And I have 6 children, and they were very, very young. And we go to the hospital. Doctor come and told us that he didn't make it, and this is the story. We are coming to a story we didn't want.
Your husband didn't just die by accident on the side of the road. I mean, there's a backstory. Someone did this to him.
It was 3 terrorists. They were looking for someone with a Jewish
appearance.
Jewish appearance.
Your husband dressed in like what we call the Orthodox outfit.
Yeah.
The long black beard, the dark suit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they follow him and shot him. At this time, there is no cemetery in Havat Gilad.
No one had died yet because it was such a young community.
Yeah. Where do we bury him? But I don't know from where I get the strength to want to bury him in Havat Gilad.
Yeah.
It changed everything for me, and I think for all the country.
The very next day, the people of Havat Gilad rallied together and built a cemetery to honor their rabbi and their friend.
This is the cemetery.
This
and
was
like
built
you see,
overnight.
Yeah. No, not all the people here want to bury here because it's dangerous. It's a danger moment to decide to be here because nothing is stable at Samaria.
This is still a very new community, still very...
I think that when I decide to bury him here, I changed it. I paved the way to people to think at the future of something.
To think that they're going to be here for many more years.
Yeah, to think of the future of something is going to happen here. So here lies your late husband. Everything that you and your husband did and this community has done is historically significant. You know, you've come back to this land and built a new place on the same hills where our forefathers lived thousands of years ago. And then even though this terrible, terrible act of violence happened to your family, you still use that to give strength to others and to help people move forward. There is no option. After something like this happened to you, there is no option. The only option is to continue to live. You need power, and so you search it everywhere. This is where I found it. All throughout the country, there are men and women who are standing firm on the promises of God. Like Abraham, they must step into dangerous and unseen circumstances and have faith to believe in things unseen.
One thing you can never deny, God is building up Zion, and he's doing it for one reason, for his holy namesake. The history of the Jewish people is because of the values that come with this life.
The main issue is not just living the past, but seeing it in the present. You can see all the prophets rising to life.
Hey, I'm Mati Shoshani, and thank you for watching the TBN Israel YouTube channel. We hope this video gave you greater understanding of Israel and her people. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. We'd love to hear from you, so be sure to share what you've learned and ask your questions in comments below. And invite your friends to join the conversation.